Let me ask you something before I get into this. Have you ever had someone try to take away the one thing keeping you alive? Not because they had a good reason, but because they were jealous of it? Have you ever watched someone you trusted decide that their comfort mattered more than your survival? Because that's exactly what happened to me. And by the time it was over, I made absolutely sure she felt every single consequence of what she'd done. So stick with me, because this story goes places I didn't see coming either. My name is John, I'm 34, and I have a seizure alert dog named Ranger. He's a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois, VA certified, trained specifically for veterans with neurological conditions. He can detect a seizure anywhere from 2 to 15 minutes before it happens. He alerts me by pressing his body against my legs and refusing to move until I acknowledge him. That warning gives me time to get on the floor, turn off the stove, move away from anything that could hurt me during a tonic-clonic episode. He has saved my life, not in a poetic, figurative way. Literally, twice that I know of, probably more that I slept through. I need you to hold on to that before I tell you the rest. Ranger is not a pet. He is not a comfort animal. He is a piece of medical equipment that breathes and loves me and has never once let me down. Jenny, on the other hand, let me down in ways I'm still processing. We met 8 months before everything fell apart. Mutual friend's birthday party. Easy conversation. She made me laugh 3 times in the first 20 minutes. We started dating pretty quickly after that. For the first 4 months, I genuinely thought I'd found someone good. She was warm, funny, attentive. She cooked dinner on Fridays. She'd scratch Ranger behind the ears when she walked through the door. Then, so slowly I almost missed it, things started shifting. The first comment was about the bed. He takes up so much space. I told her Ranger needs to sleep near me, because nighttime seizures are the most dangerous ones, the ones where you stop breathing and nobody's there to roll you onto your side. She nodded, said she understood, and I thought that was that. 2 weeks later, you talked to that dog more than you talked to me. A month after that, I feel like I'm competing with him, John. It's a little weird. Each time I explained. Each time she nodded. Each time, the comments came back sharper. I kept letting it go because I'd been in actual firefights, and a passive remark about my dog felt manageable by comparison. That was my mistake. I kept measuring her behavior against combat, and because it didn't reach that bar, I dismissed it. About 6 months into the relationship, Jenny came to me with a new angle. She wanted Ranger to sleep in the living room with the door closed. Just so we have our own space, she said. She had this particular way of phrasing things that made them sound reasonable on the surface, like she was just asking for something normal. I told her no. I explained again, clearly, that Ranger being in a room at night was non-negotiable because it was medically necessary. That nighttime is when my most dangerous seizures occur. That without him there to alert me or respond, I could have a seizure in my sleep and not wake up. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "You always make it about the dog." I said, "No, I make it about staying alive." She left that night, came back 2 days later with flowers and what sounded like a genuine apology. I accepted it. I'm telling you right now, I should not have accepted it. Not because I'm a hard person, but because that moment was the first time I saw who she actually was when she didn't get what she wanted, and I chose not to look directly at it. That was on me. Here's where the story takes a turn I didn't see coming. The following month, Jenny came to me while I was eating dinner and slid her phone across the table. She pulled up what she said was my apartment complex's pet policy. She pointed to a line that said dogs over 50 pounds required special management approval. Ranger is 65 pounds. I just thought maybe if you looked into filing for an exception, she said. Real casual, like she was doing me a favor. I put my fork down and looked at her. He's a service animal, Jenny. The Fair Housing Act exempts service animals from pet policies. That weight limit doesn't apply to him. There's nothing to file. She picked her phone back up without a word, and I thought, okay. She pushed on a door, found it locked, and moved on. She had not moved on. About 3 weeks after that conversation, I came home from a VA appointment and found a voicemail from Deborah, my apartment complex's property manager. Professional tone, formal language, the kind of message that makes your stomach drop before you even know what it says. She told me a complaint had been filed against my dog, a report of aggressive behavior toward a resident. Ranger had allegedly lunged at someone in the hallway and growled in a threatening manner. Deborah needed me to come in at my earliest convenience to discuss the matter. It was a formal notice per the terms of my lease. I stood in my kitchen and listened to that message 3 times. Ranger was sitting at my feet. He pressed his nose against the back of my hand. Just light pressure, his way of checking in when my stress levels spike. I called Deborah back that same evening. She was careful, measured, clearly uncomfortable. She gave me the outline of the complaint again, the alleged lunge, the alleged growl, the alleged fear for safety. I asked her who had filed it. She said she couldn't share that information. I asked her directly, was it Jennifer Calloway? She's listed as a frequent guest on my lease. The pause that followed told me everything before she said a single word. She is listed as a frequent guest, yes. There it was. I kept my voice completely steady. Deborah, I want to be straightforward with you. Ranger is a VA-certified service animal for seizure disorder. He has documentation going back 4 years. He has never displayed aggression toward any person in his entire working life. I believe what happened here is that someone with a personal conflict involving my service animal filed a false complaint. I'll be there tomorrow morning with full documentation, and I'd like to talk about where this goes from here. She agreed to 10 o'clock. I hung up and sat with it for a minute. Then I called Marcus. Marcus is a guy I served with who went to law school after we got out and now works at a firm handling veteran disability cases. We've stayed close. He's the kind of person you call when the situation requires someone who's going to be calm and accurate rather than just angry on your behalf. I walked him through the whole thing. The escalating comments about Ranger, the pet policy conversation, the voicemail from management. Marcus listened without interrupting. Then he said, what she did. If she filed a complaint knowingly and with the intent to interfere with your use of a service animal, that's potentially a violation of the Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Both of those have teeth. What do I do right now? I asked, go to that meeting tomorrow. Be calm, be factual, bring everything, get whatever management says in writing, and start saving every text message she's ever sent you about Ranger. I spent the rest of that evening pulling together Ranger's complete documentation, his VA certification, his training records, the letter from my neurologist stating my diagnosis, the nature of my seizures, and Ranger's role as a medically necessary accommodation, records from the 2 incidents where his alerts had directly prevented serious injury. I put it all in a folder, organized the way you learn to organize things in the military when paperwork is the difference between getting what you need and getting buried. Then I went to sleep. Ranger at the foot of the bed, like always. The next morning I walked into Deborah's office at exactly 10. I set the folder on her desk and let her go through it without saying much. I watched her read. I watched her expression shift as she moved through the neurologist's letter the VA certification, the incident records. She closed the folder and looked at me. I said, under the Fair Housing Act, a housing provider cannot take action against a resident service animal based on a single unsubstantiated complaint, particularly when that complaint comes from someone with a documented personal relationship to the resident and a known personal conflict with the animal. I'd like this complaint closed, and I'd like that closure in writing. Deborah said, John, I want to be honest with you. We are not taking any action against you or Ranger. Given what you've shown me today, we consider this matter resolved. In writing, I said again, end of day today, she said. I also asked a note in my file that the complaint had originated from a person in a personal conflict with me, specifically regarding the service animal, so that if any future complaints came in from the same source, there would be documented context. She agreed to that too. I left that office with my folder, with Ranger at my heel, and with something settled and cold sitting in my chest. Not anger, exactly. More like clarity. Jenny called me that afternoon. The first thing she said was, "How did the meeting go?" She already knew about the meeting. She was asking to find out if her plan had worked. Fine, I said. They closed the complaint. A pause. Oh, well, I'm sure it was just some kind of mix-up. Who made the complaint, Jenny? What are you talking about? The aggression report. The one that triggered a formal lease notice. Who filed it? I don't know what you're saying. I didn't. Come over tonight, I said. We need to talk. She showed up at 7 looking composed. She'd had the whole day to prepare her version of events, and she walked in carrying it like a shield. I let her sit down. I got her water, which she didn't take. Then I sat across from her, and I laid it out. I told her I knew it was her. I told her I knew she'd filed a formal complaint with my apartment management, claiming Ranger had lunged at her, a complaint that was documented, logged, and had triggered a formal lease notice. I told her I knew she'd done it because I wouldn't agree to restrict Ranger's access to my bedroom, and that she'd calculated if she created enough pressure through management, I'd choose my housing over my dog. She started to say something. I said, I'm not done. I kept going. I told her that Ranger had never lunged at her, never growled at her, that she had no injuries, no witnesses, and no evidence because none of it happened. I told her that Deborah had now noted in my file that the complaint came from a person in an active personal conflict with me, so any future complaints from the same direction would have documented context. I told her that I'd spoken to a lawyer who had explained in detail what filing a false complaint against a federally protected service animal could mean legally. She stared at me. Then she said, I was scared. I've been feeling pushed out for months. You love that dog more than you love me, and I panicked. I made a mistake. You lied to my landlord about my medical equipment. I said, that's what happened. It's a dog, John. It is a certified service animal under federal law. It is the reason I'm still here. And what you did to try to get rid of him is not a panic. It's not a mistake. It was deliberate. She shifted gears. Her voice dropped. Are you threatening me with a lawsuit? Over this. I'm informing you of the legal landscape. I said, that's different. I stood up. I need you to leave. We're done. She left. The door shut hard behind her. I looked at Ranger. He looked at me. We're good. I told him. I thought that was over. I was genuinely wrong about that. Over the next 2 weeks, Jenny ran a campaign that I can only describe as organized. First, she got my mother's number somehow. I still don't know how, and called her. Told her I'd snapped, that I'd threatened her with legal action over a dog, that I'd become cold and aggressive, and that she was scared of me. My mother, who raised me to be exactly the kind of person I am, called me directly, heard the whole story from start to finish, and then called Jenny back and told her firmly not to contact our family again. Then came the social media posts, vague enough to maintain deniability, specific enough that anyone who knew us both could follow along. Things about being discarded. Things about giving everything to someone who chose an animal over a person. Things about feeling unsafe. Mutual friends started texting me, uncomfortable and uncertain, not knowing what to say. I didn't respond to any of it publicly. I didn't text the mutual friends back with my side of the story. What I was doing, quietly, was documenting everything. Every post got screenshotted and time-stamped. Every text she'd ever sent me about Ranger got saved and organized. I went back through our entire message history and pulled everything relevant, including a text from 4 months earlier where she had written, word for word, "I'm going to find a way to get rid of that dog. I'm serious." I had it. I had all of it. Marcus had told me early on that a civil harassment complaint was viable if I could demonstrate a pattern. The false aggression report was the centerpiece, but the surrounding behavior, the attempts to use the pet policy against the service animal, the family contact, the social media campaign, all of it was relevant to intent. In several states, including ours, knowingly filing a false complaint that targets a person's disability accommodation can be pursued under state disability rights statutes on top of federal protections. Marcus filed the civil complaint on my behalf about a month after Jenny and I ended things. Jenny was served about 2 weeks after filing. She called me the same day, not composed this time. The version of her that called me that day had none of the careful presentation I was used to. She was loud, she was shaken, and she told me I would destroy her life over a dog. Over a lie, I said. You're dealing with what comes after a lie. I will fight this, John. You have no idea. Talk to your lawyer, I said, and I ended the call. Her attorney made contact with Marcus within the week. They came in pushing back hard initially, arguing the complaint was disproportionate, that no measurable harm had occurred, that this was a personal dispute being dressed up as a legal matter. Marcus laid out the documented harm piece by piece. The formal lease notice now in my rental history because of a fabricated complaint. The documented legal costs I'd incurred from day one. The neurologist's letter establishing the medical necessity of the service animal, which made interference with that animal interference with a medical accommodation. The text message where Jenny had explicitly said she intended to get rid of Ranger. The timeline showing the pet policy conversation, followed 3 weeks later by the false complaint. The social media posts and the call to my mother as evidence of a continuing pattern rather than a one-time lapse. Jenny's attorney stopped arguing about proportionality pretty quickly after that. 4 months into the case, they came back with a settlement offer. Marcus walked me through it. Here's what Jenny agreed to, in writing, notarized, a formal written retraction, sent directly to Maple Ridge Management, stating that the aggression complaint filed against Ranger had been inaccurate and should not be considered a reflection of the animal's actual behavior. A separate notarized letter acknowledging that Ranger was a legitimate VA-certified service animal and that the original complaint had not been based on factual events, and a settlement to cover my documented legal fees and out-of-pocket costs associated with responding to the complaint and the case. She signed all of it. Deborah received a retraction letter within the week. She updated my file. The formal lease notice is gone. My rental record is completely clean. And sitting in a folder next to Ranger's VA certification is a notarized letter from Jenny acknowledging, in her own attorney's formal language, that she lied. I've thought a lot about why I'm posting this. Not to celebrate. Not to pile on someone who's already dealt with consequences. But because I think there are people out there who've been in situations where someone tried to take away something critical to their survival and dressed it up as a relationship need, where someone made their comfort sound equivalent to your medical necessity, where the escalation was slow enough that you kept explaining, kept accepting apologies, kept believing the next conversation would be the one that fixed it. It doesn't fix. Not with certain people. Jenny's problem was never really Ranger. Ranger was just a thing she couldn't control. He was a piece of my life that existed entirely outside her influence that I would not negotiate on, and that reminded her every single day that there were limits to what she could ask of me. When reasonable requests didn't work, she went around me. When going around me didn't work, she went further. And she kept expecting me to fold because most people fold. Ranger is on the floor next to my chair right now. He's been there this whole time. He doesn't know what happened. He just knows it's his job to keep me safe, and he shows up for that without fail every single day. If you got someone in your life who asks you to choose between them and something that keeps you alive, that's not love asking the question. Pay attention to what happens when you say no. And if they go looking for other ways to force the answer they want, stop waiting for an apology and start taking notes. Because some people only understand consequences. And if this story hit different for you, go ahead and subscribe. Because apparently keeping a service dog requires a lawyer, and I might need backup for whatever comes next.